Hi everyone, and welcome to Words with That One Lady. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the podcast. Oh my god, it's a new year, it's 2025. We're getting into business. We're doing all we say we want to do for the new year. I'm so excited. Yeah, so today we have a very interesting topic that came up from the conversation I had yesterday with a friend. And like we always do, today is the 29th of January 2025. The topic in question is titled Upbringing. And before we dive into it, trust me to give you some good definitions. Upbringing can be defined as the treatment and instruction received by a child from its parent throughout its childhood. This is something that I know that a lot of us always talk about, like how were you raised, who raised you, the morals that you learned, and how it shaped you to be who you are today. So we've been talking about all of that. For context, I am a Nigerian woman and I grew up in a Christian African home, or should I say Christian Nigerian home. And for those who properly understand that concept or context, it means that I grew up in a home where everything was strict and regimented. There were ways to do everything. There were steps to take to do everything. And, it was all directed by what my parents knew according to, their religious beliefs and what they knew as Nigerians. Let's dive into this. Growing up as a Nigerian child, there were things we could not do that I have come to realize that a lot of people that I've come to meet now were okay with doing. Take for example, as a young child, there's a time to wake up in the morning, there's a time to open your books and read them, there's a time to watch the TV, there's a time to go to school, there's a time to go to church, there's a time to do basically everything. And this was, organized and directed by our parents. And some people would say, oh, that's you were too protected. And Nigerians who know this would say, you are an Omo, get inside. And truth be told, I was an Omo, get inside. Maybe I am still an Omo, get inside because I'm a homebody. That's a different conversation for another day. But that was how I was raised. And I went through primary school, went through secondary school, then came the life of university, where I then realized that even in the Nigeria where I was living, everybody's upbringing was very different. I remember as a young child getting into trouble for going to somebody's house to pick up something for my mother. What do I mean? So someone says, I want to give your mom something. Come to my house, let me give it to you. My mom is not around. My mom doesn't know this is happening. And I go and pick it and go back home. Mommy finds out and she goes, how dare you? Spank, spank, spank. When I look back at it, it's quite interesting, and I would refer to that, or I'll see that now as I did not tell you to do that, or I never told you that I wanted to collect something from somebody. Of course, it was not a bad thing you did help me to go pick up that stuff, but however, that was not what I told you, and I never gave you the instructions. So basically, I grew up with my mom and my dad being the ones that called the shots. Even when I had a question to ask, and this is something I still have conversation with my friends till date, I never, you could not question their authority. It was what they said or nothing else. Now, how was that? Then, I don't think I thought too much about it. To me, I felt it was, my mom and my dad's word was the way, the truth, and the life, nothing else. And now when I look back at it, I don't think there was anything wrong with it. However, it would have been better if they could explain a few things sometimes. What do I mean? So sometimes when it comes to, things like, oh, don't do this, and I'm like, why? The question, literally the next conversation from them is, are you questioning my authority? Are you questioning me? I've told you that's what I want you to do, and that's it. Simple. And I still experience it till date though. There's sometimes I have conversations with my mom and I'm like, Mom, why are you saying that? And she goes, I've said it, don't question me, just say okay. And I'm like, nah, it doesn't work like that anymore. You have to explain things to me. Now over the years, I would say from let me say nursery, primary, secondary school, never questioned them as much. I would say why once or two times, and after some screamings and shoutings, I'll be like, okay, sure, your way is it. During my undergrad year, I realized that it was not going to work like that because I had so many question marks on different things that I believed in or different things that were happening around me, which was a problem. And then, of course, as you grow up, you figure your life, you navigate it, and it becomes either you rebel or you decide for yourself what exactly works for you. For me, I don't think I ever got into a rebellious phase or rebelling phase. However, I found my way around my parents, which is when they say something, I was quick to say yes, my yes, sir, and I'll go and do what I wanted to do. Because I just did not like the arguments, the conversations that happened after, or the conversations that happened when I said, oh, I'm not going to do that, or this is not what I want to do. Take, for example, your mother says, oh, you're supposed to be home at 8 p.m. in the night, and I just say, okay, whatever time I come back, sure. Never was not, I'm just giving an example. It was never what I did in my parents' home, never. Because one thing I did not like was shouting. I would say the upbringing for my parents kept me in check. I would say the hard-handedness of my parents kept me in line. However, as I grew older, I had to decipher for myself what path I wanted to take. I deciphered for myself what exactly was what to me. Even when it came to my Christianity, even when it came to my belief as a Christian, I had to, for myself, decide that, oh, this is, what the Bible has said, this is how I understand it, and this is how I'm going to implement it in my life. Now, the next thing that I have written down here is, was it good or was it bad? I don't know. I think for some of my friends or some of the other people out there who are listening to this, or other Nigerians, or people who grew up in homes that were very strict, some people will say it was bad because when they left their parents' home and they go into uni, they see this whole world of their own and they want to just explore and do things, and they end up falling into like bad hands or falling into like, making like dangerous or crazy mistakes that are either irreversible or causes like big unrepairable damages. But for me, when I got to university, it was it's a new world. But still, I just did not like stress, so I kept to myself, or I had more older friends than anything, and I just watched their life. I think when I left my parents' home, I was more of the watching and seeing what was out there, and then deciphering for myself, okay, good or not good. So I would say my parents' upbringing was good in the sense that it kept me in check, and again, it was bad in the sense that I don't think I had as much exposure as some other people who were from houses where things were a little laissez-faire. Now, how has this shaped who I am today? Very good point. I think the upbringing that I grew up with has made me want to do a lot much better in, if should I consider this, going to have children and all that stuff. It has made me think that, okay, going forward, these are the things I don't think I want to do, or these are the ways I think things are going to be done, or how I want things to be done. Now, some people would say, well, you're saying that because maybe you did not experience. I think I experienced life. I have gone from undergrad to being out of the country and living in 2 countries, and I don't know, doing something out of the ordinary was not what came to mind. That brings me back to the conversation that, could it be that because of the way I was raised, I seem to be more worried about how my parents were going to take things that I do? Or could it be that with the way I was raised, I have the sense of fear that if my parents find out that I'm doing some things, it's going to be a problem? Conversation. Now, why did I start all these conversations? My parents were very busy people, and they still had time to smack. They still had time to punish and be very hard-handed and all of that. But I've come to realize that in our day and age, like now, it feels like so many parents don't have time to raise their kids anymore. What am I talking about? My parents worked 9 to 5s, and I would say they had our time. They legit did. But now, I feel like parents who work 9 to 5s don't seem to have times for their children anymore. And that's so concerning. And it makes me worry, because as someone who hopefully one day would have a child by God's grace, I ask myself, would you have time for your children? Would you have time to instill some kind of fear that will make them, remember in the future and not do some things, or that will shape their lives? It makes me think a whole lot. This whole conversation stems from a conversation I had with a friend yesterday. There is, I don't know if anybody has seen this TikTok video where a woman, I don't know what country she's living in, was talking about a family where the daughter was trying to talk to her mom about something over and over again, but the mother, well, very busy, work, understandably so, says later, but never had time to have whatever conversation this child wants to have. And then now they're finding out that the girl is pregnant for her brother, her older brother. And then in this video, the woman was saying that, parents these days who have moved to different countries from Nigeria and now are so, hooked up on money, and they don't have time to raise the children and, pay attention to what's happening to their children. And then it kind of rubbed me some type of way, because I'm a very ambitious individual who thinks that, work now, work. I have a few friends also who are very ambitious and, have all these goals I want to achieve. And also we want to have kids. So the question now comes as would we at any point, miss the mark when it comes to raising kids? And then it took me back to how I was brought up. My parents worked. My parents were busy people. They wake up very early. They go to work. They come back. But they still had their time to raise us up. Why is it different now? It takes me so much. It makes me think. It makes me go back. It's what did these parents that I referred to in this TikTok video that was being talked about? What happened? Did they not have time? Were they working nights? Were they working mornings? They have teenagers as children. It's quite nerve-wracking. And then I think about it and I'm well, as teenagers, we never want to talk to our parents. We kept things to ourselves. We never really talked. Then again, the different societies that we find ourselves in this time, nowadays, living in Nigeria, living in the US, Canada, or the UK, it's a whole different world. There are different exposures, there are different things that are happening, and there's a time where there was no social media. Things were not very apparent as they are now. Nowadays, if you don't tell your kids anything, they'll find it on the internet themselves. They have access to these things. So what do we do now that we are in this space where we're gonna have kids tomorrow? And I'm talking to you who's listening. What are we doing wrong? What could we do better? It's such a nerve-wracking conversation to have. And I know I have this conversation with friends, and the only thing we always say is, if we could live where we lived as Nigerians and are here where we are today, and we did not turn out bad, our kids are not going to turn out bad. Literally, that's our consolation. We're always don't worry if not, it's not like our parents taught us too much. They taught us what they knew, and then we came out to see what was out there, and we decided for ourselves, okay, this is what we want to do. Then our kids will do the same. But then again, it begs to ask the question, what are we doing wrong in our generation? What can we do better? I actually don't have an advice, but rather I'm just a little concerned of where we're going to as a generation entirely. I think upbringing is so important. So if you're thinking about having kids, please also think about the upbringing. How are you going to raise them? What are you planning to instill or imbibe in them? What are you planning to teach them? When I look back and I try to figure out, did my parents do anything wrong in my upbringing or in the way they raised myself and my sisters? I would actually say no. Why? Because if they did not raise me the way they did, I don't think I would have been able to figure out some things I figured out for myself. If they did not raise me the way they did, I don't think I would have been able to navigate life the way I have. So imagine if they had laid everything down on the table for me and I did not struggle with anything to then figure out stuff out by myself. I don't know. For example, when it came to the aspect of emotions and love, my parents didn't teach me anything about it. I remember as a young child that I would just not be able to talk about like the way I was feeling. It would just be like things that I bottled up of myself, and then I would cry a lot because that was the only outlet. So my mom was screaming at me, and I wouldn't be able to say, "Mom, I don't like that you're shouting at me," but rather I would just cry. And then she would start, "Why are you crying, Steph? Why are you crying? Stop crying, stop crying." It was so funny. I think at some point I was able to tell her, because she would always make comparisons. It was like, "See your friend that is doing this. Is this person not better? Does this person have two heads?" And I'll be like, "Mom, I don't like that you do that. Stop comparing with other people who are different." I think that was the only thing I was able to do. Tell her to stop comparing me. But in any other thing, I would just bawl my eyes out. I think up till like my late teens, I would just always cry when something was wrong with me. I didn't know how to express it. But I think by the time I was going into university, in my late teens, I started writing. And that was another means for expressing myself. I would then take paper and pen and just write things the way I would, the way I felt. But I just never liked anybody to read it, because it just felt like this sad girl or this very emotional person. That's like one example of how I say, or how I would say that my parents' upbringing made me figure out myself. Because if I did not have an issue with like expressing myself, I don't think I would have figured out that I loved writing poems and all of that stuff. I think another example of how, I feel like my upbringing from my parents were not bad was in the aspect of, my work ethic as a human or as a person. From a very young age, I did so many exams. Holy moly. In primary school, I went for like maybe primary 1 to primary 3. I was one of those kids who would jump classes. And then I got to secondary school. My parents will allow me to be writing two exams at the same time, like 2 GC, 1 WAEC, 2 JAM, blah, 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 blah. It was just so much. But now I realize that it made me to be that person who I can do like 1,000,001 things at the same time. Granted, I've now figured out that I also need to strike a balance with all my working. One of the things I also learned about myself. But them being on my neck about studying every day and no TV, no this, has made me the disciplined person that I am today. However, I now know that as I am growing to be a parent also, I will try as much as possible to make sure that although I want my kids to be very studious and all of that, that they have something called balance in their life. And I think that was one thing that I was missing. So that being said, I don't think they did it wrong with my upbringing, but it made me who I am, and it's going to make me be a better parent. But then again, I really hope that one's ambition doesn't take away from them bringing up their children well. Because my parents did struggle with that. Take for instance, my dad worked really late, like not really late, worked really hard, worked from morning, like they go to work very early, in the morning at 6 a.m. and he'll come back at 6 p.m. And once he's coming back from work, every one of us were lining up in front of him with our assignments for him to correct. When I was growing up, he would always say, "Once I'm coming back from work, I want you to greet me with your assignments." So as he's coming in, one of us, because myself and all my sisters, would just, somebody's taking off his shoes, Mom's in the kitchen preparing his food, and every other person's coming with the assignment, and you're just coming to show him what you've done. And he was very ready to help correct, no matter how tired he was from his long day. And he did that. I think what I'm trying to say here is, no matter how you think your upbringing was, what have you learned from it? I think a lot of us castigate our parents a lot, and we're like, "Oh, they did bad, they did what, this," but we forget that there's no manual to raising up a child, though. There's literally no manual. I'm sure you've seen all these those videos on TikTok where they say, "Oh, we had this baby and they gave it to us to come back home with, like, someone has a child, like give birth to a child, and after a couple of hours you're giving the child to go home with no manual." And you're like, "Okay, what do we do with the child now?" Oh my God. Literally, that's what our parents experienced. And they brought us up the way they thought was good. The way they thought was fit, was great for them. And we're who we are today based on two things. Based on how they have brought us up to be and who we have decided for ourselves to be. Because at some point in our lives, we all did not decide that, okay, well, this is how I grew up and this is who I want to be. I think the problem is, in our day and age, a lot of people have decided not to be adults for themselves, but continuously blame their parents for who they are today. But don't get me wrong, I know that some people grew up in homes where it was pretty much not great and there's trauma from it. A lot of us have trauma from our upbringing. However, at some point, you choose for yourself who you want to be, how you want to be, and if you want to be a different person from how you were raised and be a better person for the children you would have or would not have, and even be a better person for the society and for yourself. I think after my conversation with my friend yesterday, it kind of made me want to record an episode talking about upbringings. How were you raised? Tell me in the comments. How did you grow up? Did you grow up in a strict home? Did you grow up in a very laissez-faire home? And following this upbringing, how has it shaped you today? Was it good? Was it bad? When you look back at it now, do you think your upbringing was good or bad? And how has it shaped the person that you are today? Did you continue in that very strict lifestyle? And just so you know, I'm still Christian. I never changed. I just learned a better way to be a Christian. I just learned that it's okay to question things, because I grew up not wanting to question or not, being told not to question things. And now I know I can question well and get answers in the way that I need, in the way that serves me good. So yes, and going forward, the upbringing that you got from your parents, how are you making sure that you're doing better for the people around you, your society? One thing I also worry about, and a few of my friends will worry about, is raising your children well and those around you don't do the same, and then your seemingly well brought up kids have to mix with these people. I think that's something that we always worry about, because my mom will always say, oh, raising kids in the Western world is not the greatest, bring them back to Nigeria to get, the training that they need. And granted, when I was much younger, I did see kids who were brought back from America, brought back from the UK to come back into Nigeria. They were either tricked back to Nigeria just because they wanted to instill some form of discipline in them. I did see that happen. And then begs the question, like, what happened there? Is it that the parents missed the to discipline their kids properly, or the world we live in does not allow for that kind of upbringing to happen? Anyway, guys, I have blabbed for a long time now, and I hope this makes sense to somebody. And you have spent a lot of time commenting in the comment section about what your upbringing was like and what you intend to do. And I think one thing I would like to leave with every one of us is this: there is no perfect way to bring up a child. I think one thing we should all take away is also that as much as we are going to prep ourselves to be great parents or maybe great uncles and aunts if we don't want a child, these children are going to end up learning from you and then deciding for themselves what they want to be. And even if you make mistake as a parent, your kids, your nephews, your nieces, your cousins, whatever they end up being to you, will, through your mistakes in their life, learn to be better people. Just the same way every one of us today have learned from the mistake of our parents to be who we are today. If you ever worry about, oh my God, am I going to raise the best kids, or am I going to be the best uncle and auntie? Just know that you'll do your best and you will leave the rest for the child themselves to decide who they want to be when they grow up. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode today. I hope you've liked the video. I hope you've shared with somebody. And I hope that you also subscribed to our YouTube channel, or if you're going to listen to this, in audio, or you're listening to this in audio version. Thank you so much once again. And until next time, keep living your truth. And I hope to God that we end up being great parents, uncles, and aunties. Until next time, guys, have a wonderful day. Bye now.